We are in extraordinary times. I mean, so many developments when it comes to this story over the weekend, not just hitting that 40,000. We know those official figures will show later today. But the horrific petrol bomb attack on the Manston migrant processing centre, which did injure some, very, very frightening. The man then later went and committed suicide in his car. The pressure on hotels, about tens of thousands of these largely young men being put up in hotels. The Daily Telegraph reporting that migrants are going to be side by side with the public in hotels instead of whole hotels being bought up. Millions, even billions over the year being spent on this. Why do you think the government hasn't got to grips with this?
Well, I mean, the small boats crisis is clearly out of control and an entirely fresh approach is now needed. What's been happening is simply not working. And I think that's for two reasons. Firstly, because every single attempt to get on top of this crossing is delayed or thwarted by a rag bag of people who seem to want open borders and don't seem to want us to get a grip on this particular situation.
Are you talking about the human rights lawyers, the various charities helping these people?
Exactly. We've seen people just object to absolutely everything, object to the new laws coming through, object to any agreements put in place, object to all of the efforts of the government to try and tackle this issue. And that's really not on, because it puts people's lives at risk crossing the channel, and it also results in this absolutely uncontrolled amount of people arriving that we've now seen, as you say, 40,000 people this year alone.
I mean, again, those numbers are extraordinary. And I'd like to point out the 40,000 are the ones who've been caught by, the border services and actually found by the police. We also know, I mean, you reported over the weekend, wrote a piece for the Mail on Sunday about actually, local people just coming across people running away from the beach, being chased down the towns. There are numerous other people arriving who are not caught by the authorities. We have no idea how many more of them are here.
And I think that's why we need to make sure that we've got strong border security across the channel, because there are landings on the beaches. There'd been less in recent months, but they've started up again. And we had a couple last weekend. And in that particular incident, migrants got out of the boat. They went into a nearby residential area, and one was eventually found apprehended in a woman's bedroom. So I think people are rightly concerned who live in my community along those coastal villages when these landings happen. I think it's important to listen to their concerns. I think it's absolutely essential to get a grip on this and make sure that boats can't land on our beaches.
Why do you think there seem to be so many people who don't think this is an issue, largely on the left, liberal left, largely, I would think, living in Islington and Hampstead in North London? They just don't seem to think this is an issue of concern. And anyone who raises it is just a horrible old xenophobe, probably racist person who has no care for the poor people of the world who are desperate to get to safety and a better life in the UK. Well, why do you think they think that rather than where you and I are coming from here?
I do think that there is some confusion about this issue. It's not an issue of providing safe refuge to people in need. That is provided by the UN Convention, and people can get that refuge and asylum in France and many other countries if they need that. This is about illegal immigration. It is about organised criminality. And what we need to see is the French really tackling it that way as well. And that's why I want to see joint patrols with the French on the French beaches to stop the boats getting in the water, and a joint patrol across the channel to make sure that boats can be picked up and turned back to France. I think that would be the quickest and the surest way to end this crisis.
But the reality is, I mean, we've been asking the French to help with this. A previous Home Secretary, Priti Patel, was sending tens of millions of pounds to the French to help do this, and they don't do it. They just stand. We've got video footage of them standing by watching boats getting into the water. We know the beaches they set sail from, and no one is there guarding those beaches, stopping them happening. The French don't seem to have any urge to do this. They're quite happy to get rid of these people, let's be honest, although I think they're crazy, because if there wasn't this pull and this route, then people wouldn't be travelling through France to go to those camps in northern France to do this. But is there any expectation that even with the biggest bromance and rapprochement between Rishi Sunak and Emmanuel Macron, that any sort of deal is going to be done, that the French will actually act to help us?
Well, I mean, this is a problem for northern France as well as for us, precisely because it does have that pull factor of people arriving in France and having this organised criminality right across northern France and indeed other European countries now. So it is absolutely essential for France, other European countries to work with us to bring an end to it. I do think the key is President Macron here. We have had agreement after agreement between Home Secretaries on each side, so our Home Secretary and her counterparts, first under Priti Patel and the current discussions under Suella Braverman. I really think it needs the Prime Minister and President Macron to do the deal and actually get those joint patrols down on the beaches. We do work with France on joint security management of the border. We do it every single day of the week. We need to do it on this issue. It now is absolutely vital that that happens, particularly after those distressing and appalling scenes of the firebombing at the Dover Migrant Centre.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. Indeed, a man, has killed himself, it appeared, in his car at a nearby garage after hurling 3 petrol bombs attached with fireworks at the migrant processing centre in Dover. Big concerns about this. 2 people did suffer minor injuries, but thankfully no one else was killed. 700 migrants were transported to Manston afterwards. It was already overcrowded. It's more overcrowded now. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, made a visit to Manston yesterday, and he talked about an intolerable situation there. Have you visited? Can you verify what the situation is? What is intolerable about it?
Manston's situation is clearly in a very bad place and it needs to be improved. But it's the symptom and not the cause. The cause is the small boats crossings crisis. The cause is the sheer numbers of people who are arriving day after day. And that facility at Manston is a new facility set up earlier this year. It is in addition to the existing Dover facility, which itself had been overwhelmed due to the sheer numbers. I think we've got to ask ourselves, does the solution lie in just creating more and more facilities for more and more arrivals, or does the solution arise in actually getting a grip on this issue, stopping the boats leaving France and bringing an end to this small boats crisis? Otherwise, I fear we will just see greater and greater numbers. The system is already overwhelmed. It's simply not an acceptable, sensible place to be.
Do you have any faith that Suella Braverman, the new Home Secretary, second time in the job in a matter of a couple of weeks, do you have any faith that she can deal with this issue?
I've had many conversations with the Home Secretary about this issue, as you would expect, and I don't think anyone doubts her passionate determination to tackle this issue. But as we've seen before, it is a case of actually translating that into actions that will be put into effect and make a difference on the ground. In the most immediate term, that does mean stopping the boats leaving France. There are obviously a whole range of other measures, but at the moment, a number of those are held up in the courts. A number of those are subject to more legal changes that need to go through Parliament. So all efforts really have to go on stopping those boats and tackling the issue head on.
Really appreciate you joining us, Natalie Elphick, Conservative MP for Dover. Thank you.